Time for some more kitchen table astronomy at the Amherst table of Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed. Mr. Universe, you brought me here under false pretenses. I thought we were going to talk about Taylor Swift. My big kids went to go see Taylor Swift on Saturday night in the rain. Blew their minds. So great. Phoebe Bridgers opened up. Incredible show. And for my young ones who scored those tickets.
So they did go?
Yeah, they went.
Wow.
They went without me. First, big stadium show. And
I can't believe you didn't go.
I wanted to go, but the tickets were so hard to come by. I told my son, who's a Swiftie, and was on all the right lists to get them. I said, get tickets for the whole family. No matter what they cost, we'll buy them. He could only get two.
Our neighbors, they went, had a daughter and their father they went over there and they had a blast.
Yeah.
It just seems like, I would have been I was thinking about it. Okay, if I was a Swiftie, maybe I am. No, I was just thinking, would I have gone? And I was I would have thought, it's too much rain. It doesn't make sense.
I know, the rain, they're going to get pneumonia. Isn't there a comet named after Taylor Swift? Swift-Tuttle?
That is right. Although, but no.
Okay, right.
But soon. I'm sure if I discover a planet, a comet, of course, or an asteroid.
Yeah.
I'm totally naming it Swifty comet, asteroid.
All the billboards around Gillette Stadium were crafted to welcome Taylor Swift. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I think they should rename asteroid belt.
Yeah, right. The
Swifty
Taylor
belt.
Swift asteroid belt.
There you go. So what I wanted to talk about, I don't know how we got into that, but what I want to talk about is one of the moons of Mars. And we don't think about moons of Mars because they are very small. And so astronomers thought they knew, or kind of thought they knew how those moons were formed. So it has two moons.
Are we the only planet in our solar system that has one moon?
Well, but Venus doesn't have any. Mercury doesn't have any.
Okay.
So you should be grateful for what you have and not covet other planets' moons, okay? But here is the thing. But we have a pretty big moon, and so
our moon is bigger than Pluto.
that is true. And also the moons of Mars, even though it has two, Phobos and Deimos, which again I think they were sons of Ares, so from that mythology.
Phobos Bridgers, who opened up for Taylor Swift.
And Deimos Bridges.
And John Deimos, who was Uncle
boy.
Jesse on Full House.
I don't know whether we can even finish this today. But so it has two moons. Phobos is about 17 miles, and they're irregular shaped. So 17 miles, on the longest side. And
Weird, that's small. 17 miles.
yeah, and it orbits actually not that far, about 3,700 miles above Mars, and Deimos. Well, you were thinking Phobos was small. Deimos is about 9 miles on the longest side, and they're weird. So Phobos is called the potato shaped and things like that. So, but Deimos is much farther away, about 15,000 miles away, and in fact, I think Opportunity, one of the rovers, filmed the Deimos going across the sun. It was an eclipse.
Yeah.
Except that, it is so tiny and so far away that it was it's like a transit, like when Venus transits our sun. So it was a little bit more than that. But yeah, so there actually, if you go on the intertubes, you can actually find this kind of transit going on. So that's kind of cool. But astronomers have been asking, so your question as well, hey, how come we just have one moon? So astronomers have been trying to answer this question, how do these moons form? And that's a kind of a cool question. Mm-hmm. Our own moon, until humans landed on the moon and got samples from there, and then we found out actually that some of the stuff actually, it's like the Earth or the crust of the Earth. So they go okay, so our own moon formed because a large Mars-sized body collided with the Earth, and that ejecta basically formed our moon.
So I like to think of our moon is the Earth's baby.
That is,
it was formed out of our own body.
That's right, and the other body that came in, the Mars-sized body, we don't. it
went blasted through the solar system and kept going, or whatever.
Oh, and a lot of the stuff is in the Earth as well, or it collided with it, and so that's one way of forming a moon. And Earth's moon is spherical because it's large from gravity perspective, and then you have many moons of Jupiter, for example, especially the large moons, where we think they formed when Jupiter was forming. So that is more like analogous to the formation of the solar system. So like, so you have a protoplanetary disk and the planets congeal together in the same way. Jupiter you can think of as a mini solar system, that the way Jupiter was forming, so alongside you had these other moons formed. Now, not all of them, because Jupiter has a lot of moons. Saturn has now, I don't know, they keep on coming up with more moons, that they've found sort of like 80 more moons or something like that. So I don't know the exact number. I think Saturn is now 140 or something like that. A lot of them are pieces that have been grabbed. Some of them are pieces from a colliding moons or whatever. But overall, the large moons of Jupiter, they think, were formed from similar type of model. But what about moons of Mars? I mean, so we are just talking about moons, and there are all these different methods. So astronomers used to think that Phobos and Deimos, because of their irregular shape, because of their small size, and asteroid belt being not that far, they thought actually those two were sort of like captured asteroids. The problem was that so that's what the general assumption was, but there were some challenges, as it happens with everything, because you come up with a theory, and of course some astronomer has to raise its hand, and or her hand, and say, wait a minute, what about this? So that was the problem, that they are in tight circular orbit, and Mars doesn't have enough atmosphere for it to drag, and to bring them into tight circular orbit. And so, but there was no other better alternative. And that was the going idea up until this year. And there is, I think, many people know there are, 2 years ago, there were several probes that went to Mars. In fact, on the ground, there is a NASA rover that is on the ground. There's a Chinese rover on the ground. And then there are orbiters. So at that time, one of the orbiters that is still orbiting the Mars was from United Arab Emirates. And it's a newer space agency. And this is one of their big sort of like successful missions, because going to Mars and successfully getting into orbit, it is hard. And in fact, most missions have failed actually. So their HOPE orbiter has been going around Mars. It has been giving fantastic data. And after it did most of the stuff that it was supposed to do, to observe auroras on Mars and other things, now it actually provided us with close-up pictures, relatively close-up pictures of Deimos. And what it found, and it has 3 instruments in which it can also look for what is it made up of, right? The composition. So it's not just so first of all, there are beautiful images of sort of like, of the moon itself, which is kind of like a weird sort of like, little rock type thing. But it also found the composition, and its composition, surprisingly, it's a little bit more like Mars. And
so it might have been a baby of Mars's.
Right. So not the kind of asteroid astronomers thought. They thought it was a particular type of asteroid, but when they actually measured the composition, it is more like Mars rather than of those type of asteroids. And so now astronomers think that actually these moons may have been formed from some sort of collision, and that sort of like, whatever leftover body, sort of like, leftover material is on orbit, and that's what we have.
So that's more like our own moon.
A little bit, yeah, but let me bring it back. And I know I'm making a mistake here, but let me go back to Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Or the Swift. And the reason is because, and I just found it fascinating that Deimos has 2 craters and that are named. I mean, so there are 2 features that have been given names. One of them is Voltaire, and the other one is Swift. Not making this up. And so I'm going to disappoint a lot of people. So Fabulous 413 may get a lot of hate mail regarding that. But no, it's not Taylor Swift, but it's Jonathan Swift. And it's really interesting because so these moons, both Phobos and Deimos, were discovered actually by U.S. Naval Observatory, an astronomer over there, in 1877. And in fact, they were both discovered, I think, within a few days of each other. But their presence, weirdly enough, was predicted in a short story by Voltaire in the 18th century, and also by Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels.
Oh, wow.
And I think, Gulliver's Travels, I think in 1726, and there were these astronomers in the land of Laputa, that was the flying island, and they mentioned about 2 moons of Mars, and they actually talk about their period, like how long it takes and how far away they are from the surface of Mars. And weirdly, it's actually not that far off from what we know, even though they were not discovered for another 150 years.
Wow.
Which, and again, if you are into conspiracies, which Monte, I know you are.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Then some people speculate that maybe Jonathan Swift was a Martian. but anyway, so it's just fascinating. So that's the reason why the 2 craters that are named, one is named after Jonathan Swift, one after Voltaire. But yeah, I mean, I just love Gulliver's Travels. I mean, it's just so much more than usually it shows up in movies or what the highlighted parts are.
Yes.
So little people, big people, and things like that. But there is so much more. And so, yeah, the land of Laputa astronomers were talking about 2. At that time, they should have been purely hypothetical, and yet later on, astronomers found the 2 moons around there. And just to show science fiction, we've talked about Arthur C. Clarke, and Arthur C. Clarke, he told us not to land on all lands of ours except for Europa. Make no attempt to land there. I think we should take that seriously, because Arthur C. Clarke also predicted, or in one of his books, I think Rendezvous with Rama, he had a moon of Pluto, and at that time we had not discovered it. So Arthur C. Clarke, definitely Plutonian.